Hello, Put Me in Coaching family. So glad to be back here on this Memorial Day weekend. Happy Memorial Day weekend, and a huge shout out to all those who have served and especially those who have made the ultimate sacrifice so that we can enjoy time with our families and the freedom that we have to do the things we want to do, right? And live the life we want to live. so, um, Tonight we are going to talk about dialing in to level up. Sometimes we get so focused on the big picture that we forget that sometimes it's just about making little changes, right? And those little changes can add up to big results. Okay, so if you're watching live, go ahead, drop a hashtag live in the comments. If you're watching the replay, go ahead, drop a hashtag replay. Doesn't matter when you get the information, just as long as you're getting the information. So, we're going to do a little bit of a recap. We haven't done that in a little while. So, a little bit of a refresher on our systems, the three pillars, and what the formula looks like. And then we are going to take it a step further and do a little bit of work around where is it that you are really needing to dial in. I know for me, I am needing to dial in my water intake, especially as the summer gets here, right? Wintertime is a little hard to make sure you're keeping up with the water because you're just not as thirsty. Summertime is the most important time to keep up with your water, especially if you're in the hotter climates, especially here in Florida. I was doing a gym workout yesterday, and we know my gym, my weightlifting gym, doesn't have air. It was over 100 degrees in there when I got there, and that was just how my schedule worked out, right? But I noticed it, right? I was physically, it was hard because it was so hot. And so making sure that I'm hydrating, I've got my water here, and just making sure I'm dialing in that water intake. So as we look at the things we need to dial in, right? We've got the what we eat, what we think, and what we do. And we've talked a lot in the past couple of weeks about our mindset and really dialing in to create a great morning routine and to really set yourself up for success by doing the morning routine and really kind of changing the way we think. Okay, so we've done the work there. What we eat, what we think, what we do. So we really need to focus when we're dialing in on what we're eating, what we're thinking, and what we're doing, right? All three of those things. And we do that by applying the 7-step signature system that we talk about, right? We've got the opt in, the education, accountability, tracking, behavior modification, tracking all wins, and giving back. Okay, so those are the 7 steps we need to really think of when we think about how we're going to dial in. All right, and then of course we have our formula. 20 to 30 grams of protein every single time we eat, and that needs to be your minimum. That is your bare minimum, 20 to 30 grams of protein. And then we build around that. Okay, we look at the fat, 5 to 8 grams of fat, 5 plus grams of fiber, and then 10 to 15 grams of carbohydrates or less per meal. And when we get into that 10 to 15 grams of carbohydrates, we really get into the thought process of not adding a bunch of processed junk, right? We talked about that a couple weeks ago as well. Because what happens is that 10 to 15 grams really helps us dial in what types of carbohydrates we need to be eating, right? And that comes from our vegetables, fruits and vegetables. If we stick with that and our proteins, that's all we need to really make the progress that we want to make. Okay, so when you're thinking about dialing in, all right, analyze your formula, which you can do because you're tracking. So analyze where is it within that formula that maybe you're a little off track and you could dial it in just a little bit. And then, of course, you have your activity level. Okay, maybe your activity level is lacking a little bit. Maybe that's what needs to be dialed in. Maybe your nutrition is on point and you are really needing to dial in your activity. Or maybe you've got to dial in the negative thoughts. And I will tell you, I find myself when I am not eating as clean as I need to be eating, it is so much easier for those negative thoughts to flow in. Why? Because I don't feel as good, right? And I was sick last week, which is why we didn't have class. And, I very rarely get sick. And so it was really interesting to kind of watch that I had to catch myself several times because it's like, man, I don't feel well. And so then you start to kind of spiral. And it's easy to course correct when you're able to notice it. But when you don't notice it, that's where you get into that danger zone. And then you start to spiral and you think, man, I can never do this. I'm just always going to be off track. It's so hard. You start using terms like that. Whereas if you could just change your language a little bit to, I am going to do this. I'm going to put in the effort. I'm going to make these small changes. I'm going to dial in so that I can level up. And when we think about it in terms of those small chunks, it's a little bit less overwhelming, right? How do we eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How did I lose 113 pounds? I lost 1 pound 113 times. It was you lose 1 pound, you rinse and repeat. Okay. And so when you think in terms of dialing it in, really start to focus on, hey, what is that one thing that I can dial in this week? And so this week, my dial in is going to be my water intake and supplements, right? Because I've noticed that those have kind of lacked a little bit. And I know that because I track, right? And so it's really important that we're tracking so that we can easily figure out what we need to dial in. All right. So when you're thinking in terms of, and I want to break it down just a little bit further than that, right? So let's say you're looking at your formula, okay? And maybe your carbohydrates seem to be where they need to be. Your fat is pretty much where it needs to be, but your protein is too little, right? That's where you find yourself in the hunger phase. You start craving, and then you start to make poor choices because you're just simply not eating enough protein. Or on the flip side, maybe you are eating too many carbohydrates, right? Your protein's good, but you're mixing in too many carbohydrates with all of the additives because you're substituting some things out and whatnot. And it's just not exactly where it needs to be. So that's where you need to dial in. Okay, I need to focus on green vegetables. Okay. And so that's how we kind of look at it from a nutrition standpoint. So the what we eat. Now, if we're going to the what we think, okay, the science kind of says that you have about 17 seconds. And if you think something for 17 seconds, you're more likely to start thinking about it for another 17 seconds and another 17 seconds. And then it kind of starts to take over. So if you have a negative thought, it's okay, right? It's okay to have, you're going to have a negative thought. That's natural. However, give yourself less than 17 seconds. Think the negative thought for a second, and then we move on. We move to something positive. We switch it to a positive. And how do we do that, right? How does it seem less cumbersome to start thinking positively? Well, we've talked about this a long time ago. We haven't talked about it in a while, but you have the power and the tool of the wouldn't it be nice if. So let's say you're starting to worry about money, for instance. Man, I don't have any money. I'm not making enough. And then you catch yourself and you say, wouldn't it be nice if I had all the money I ever wanted and more? And it feels a little lighter, and it's not as forceful as saying, I have all the money I need and more. You're going to get to that point to be able to say that and to manifest that. But sometimes when we're so down here in our vibration, it's hard to say a vibration up here and really mean it. And so then our subconscious just doesn't catch on. But if you can say wouldn't it be nice if I could eat clean daily? Wouldn't it be nice if I could exercise daily? Wouldn't it be nice if I felt and could hold on to the feeling I get when I exercise daily? It's a little less daunting than saying that you're doing all of these things already when your subconscious isn't allowing you to say that because you're in that negative thought. So that's when you're needing to dial in your mental stuff, your mental fitness and all of that. All right. And then you have the what we do. And this is just simply taking action. which is sometimes the hardest part. That's the hardest thing to do, is take that one step forward. And that's where you have to have the discipline, right? Discipline is choosing between what you want now and what you want most. Did I want to get up and go to the gym this morning? I, in fact, did not. I was very sore from my workout yesterday. I did not want to go this morning, but I made myself. And the way I made myself, I sent a text message to somebody saying, hey, I'm going to the gym. So then I was like, okay, I can't be a liar now. I have to actually get up and go, right? And I did. And this is where you have to force yourself to take action, okay? Maybe that action is you're planning your meals out. Maybe that action is you're filling in your food log, right? Sometimes we have to just make ourselves do that. And that's not always glamorous, right? That's not always fun. That's not always a quick tip and an easy tip, right? Nobody said it was easy, but it's simple. Okay. And it will get easier. It becomes a habit. But until it becomes a habit, you need to schedule it in and you have to make yourself do it. Okay. And that making yourself comes from the discipline of deciding and choosing, right? So we decide, act, commit, succeed, repeat. Okay. You have to make the decision. You have to act. You've got to commit. That's when you're going to see that success. Okay. But that action is the hardest part sometimes, because you hear people say all the time, I want to do this. I'm going to do this. And then they never do it, right? Put a yes in the chat if that's ever been you. I know that's been me. I've said, hey, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And then it doesn't get done. And so then it just becomes a dream or a goal, right? But it doesn't become a reality because I've just simply said it. I haven't done anything. I haven't taken any action toward the goal. And when we don't take action, that's where we're just kind of sitting and wishing that it would come to us. Okay. So it does take work, right? It took work to click on play this class, right? You made the decision to play this class, whether it was live or the replay. You made a decision. You made a decision to get healthy, right? Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. All right. So you made that decision. Now, what actions are you taking to ensure that you're meeting your goal, to ensure that you are not just making it a, well, I want to, but I didn't ever do any actions towards getting there, right? So that action is the dial in. So what are you dialing in and where are you leveling up to? And remember, it can be little steps, right? Those little things. Okay. So you take one bite at a time. Maybe this week you're dialing in your water intake and you say, okay, I'm going to set a goal and I'm going to take action. And this is the action I'm going to take. And I'm not going to stop until I do this. Right. And then again, that habit stacking, and we just continue to add on just a little bit more. Right. Especially as things become habit. Right. It's a habit for me to get up and do my morning routine. Why? Because I've done it for years. Okay. It is a habit for me I don't drink anything before I have water in the morning. Nothing. I don't drink anything until I drink water first, right? Even if it's just 4 to 8 ounces of water, right? I don't drink anything else. No supplements, no nothing until I have some plain water, right? And I keep the water on my nightstand. Very first thing I do. Okay. And why did I create that habit? Well, because I found myself years ago, I would wake up and the first thing I would want was a Diet Coke or an energy drink or something like that. And it's like, no, we're not doing any of that until we have water, right? So we switched the habit up. And so now I'll go to the gym and now I'm a whole 32 to 48 ounces in with my water intake for the day before I drink anything else, right? Because I go to the gym first. So I'm getting that habit built. so that water intake doesn't become a problem. Now, I was sick, so that's why my water intake was a little bit less this week because I wasn't going to the gym as frequently. And so that routine was off. And so I found myself needing to check myself on the water intake. And so that's why I said, okay, I am dialing in water intake this week, and dialing in my supplements. All right. Because again, I don't want to get sick again. Right. I want to make sure I'm feeling my best so that I can give back on the level I want to give back. I can show up where I need to show up. All right. And so those are the things that I need to dial in. Go ahead, drop in the comments or send me a text message on what it is that you're needing to dial in, right? Are you needing to dial in following the formula? Are you needing to dial in your protein intake specifically? A lot of times the protein intake is what's suffering when I'm looking at food logs and it's like, okay, yep, everything looks pretty good, except the protein intake is low. Or maybe the carbohydrate intake is way too high to be able to reach the goals that you're wanting to reach. All right. Do you need to dial in the mental fitness? Maybe you need to stop watching the news as much because there's a lot of negativity out there. I see it all the time. Right. And then you become anxious, and then you're wondering what's going to happen. And then before you know it, you've spiraled all the way out into left field when you're over here. And it's like left field has nothing to do with you, not immediately anyway. And so there's nothing you can do to change it, but you're worried about it, right? When in reality, we can only control how we respond, right? That's one of the principles of behavior. We can only control how we respond to a situation. We can't control what's going to happen. We can only control how we respond. And so if we respond with anxiousness and anticipation and negativity, that's what we're allowing and we're attracting in. But if we respond with, hey, I'm focused on dialing in so that I can level up, then all this noise around us and left field, right field, all of that, it doesn't phase us because we're so focused on the goal that we are working toward that nothing can stand in the way. Right. And we are so positive that we can achieve this goal because we're putting in the work mentally. We're putting in the work physically, right? We're putting in the work with the things that we're eating. We're so focused that it's very hard to derail us. It becomes so much easier to say no, thank you, because you are in this spot of you are dialed in. And a lot of times where I see people get off track is they have their friends or whatever are influencing them. Oh, come on, you can't have just one. And it becomes very difficult to say no, thank you. I was at a networking brunch today. It was bottomless mimosas, right? For the whole table. And it was so easy for me to say no, thank you, because it just doesn't serve me. It doesn't work with my goals. And so it was so easy to say, no, thanks, I'm good. You can have mine or whatever. It was just a non-thing. And nobody was mad at me, right? Nobody was upset. It wasn't awkward. It was just, oh, okay, no problem. You don't drink, no problem. And when you think about that, it's because I'm so dialed in and so focused on where it is I'm going that it was just a no-brainer. I didn't even have to think about it. And I didn't feel like I was missing out, right? I still got the fellowship. I still got all of that, but I didn't feel like I was missing out. Okay. So when we can become so dialed in as far as their non-negotiables, right? These are the things I do, and these are the activities that I do to reach my goals, then it becomes almost impossible to derail you. Okay. And it starts by making those small, tiny changes, because then it's not as overwhelming for our brain. And we're able to just say, hey, this is what I'm focused on this week. So anything outside of that is a no, right? It's not going to happen. And then next week we add another little tiny change to dial in on. And then before you know it, you've stacked up all of these things and you are living the way you want to be living, right? You are achieving your goals. All right. So that's what I want us to focus on this week is what do you need to dial in? All right. And so next week we will be back 7 p.m. same time. And we are going to talk about, so we've dialed in, we're leveling up. And so how are we continuing to stack those habits? And how are we continuing to move forward with continued, not only motivation, but continued discipline? All right. So that's what we're going to touch on next week. I will see you back here 7 p.m. next Sunday. And in the meantime, figure out and let me know what you are dialing in on so that you can level up. I will see you back next Sunday, 7 p.m.